There are 168 hours in a week. We go to church for 1 hour. What about the other 167?
Cue this podcast. We're here to bring the church to you the rest of the week. I'm David Vogel, the Director of Communication here at Central Community Church.
I'm Corey Brodel, the Director of Community. We've been to the 1 hour in church. Now welcome to the other 167.
Well, we are here today with the Central Community Church Director of Finance, Rod Opliger, and this is going to be a hard conversation because we're talking about finance.
Money. Yes.
But good. It'll be a good one.
It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. So we're having you here, Rod, because 2020 has probably hit some people, probably a lot of people, financially. So we're just going to have you share some biblical principles for finances.
Okay. Sounds good.
But I think you're starting this off a little different. Yeah, you got me nervous.
I want to ask you guys a couple of questions regarding money and finances and wealth, those kinds of things. And the first thing is that, we have a world population of about 7 billion people, right?
True.
So that is true. That is true. No, the question is, of the 7 billion, how many are living in poverty? That meaning they live on $2 or less a day.
Oh, wow.
Of that 7 billion, how many?
You want a percentage?
No, number. Estimate out of the 7 billion.
I'm going to say 4 billion.
I was going to say 4.5. Actually, I was going to say 4,500,000. I'm not going that specific.
You guys are good.
Are we?
Well, the breakdown is that there's 2.6 billion that live on $2 a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's another 1.2 billion that live on less than $1 a day.
Wow.
So you add those together, that's almost 4 billion people. Over half the world's population lives on $2 a day or more or less. And so the thing is, we look at that and say how the Lord has blessed this country. Because we think of people that are in poverty here, they would be like kings in some of these third worlds. And so that's the thing I try to stress to people that, we have problems, we have issues, we have financial issues, but when you're looking on a global scale, we are so blessed. And so that's the first thing I think is important for us to understand. And then I got a couple, 3 Bible facts for you, okay? And these may be a little tougher. Okay. How many verses are in the Bible that directly speak to money or material possessions? How many verses? In the Bible. The whole
money
Bible.
Or material possessions.
Right.
Blake, you got an answer for this back there behind the controls?
I'm going to let you say it, and then I'm going to add 5, okay?
Well, if this was the Price is Right, we'd be shooting low, right? No, I'm going to say, I'm going to shoot really low. I'm going to say 9.
9?
9.
Okay, I was going to say 40, so I'm going to add more than 5. I'm going to say 40.
Well, you guys really bombed on this one. How about 2,350?
Whoa!
Wow.
Okay.
Verses that.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah,
huh?
Blake didn't know that either.
Can we cut and start over?
Okay, second one. Out of all of Jesus' parables, what percent of those related to money and possessions? Out of all these parables, what percent?
Percentage.
Wow.
I'm going through all the parables that I can think of right now. Corey, you go first. I'll add 5.
Okay, it's a percentage, so I'm going to say 40%.
45%.
Good. You guys are close. 50%, over half of his parables relate to money and material possessions.
Wow, 50%. Okay,
this is only true and false, okay? So this is an easy one. All right.
I've got a 60% chance of losing.
Jesus spoke more about money and material possessions than he did about heaven and hell combined. True or false?
True.
Oh, man. Okay, I'll say true.
You're true.
Oh, wow.
So does God care about money and material possessions? Does he care about that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Based upon the Bible. And if he cares about it, should we care about it?
Wow.
Right? I mean, that's the thing that kind of always hits me. You don't really realize how much is in the Bible regarding material possessions. And, that's the thing that, I teach a couple of courses about financial peace. And anyway, that's the important thing that people try to strive for is financial peace, right? And that's what we're talking about this COVID area, any period, that we want that peace, that we're right in the middle of God's will in terms of how we handle our finances, And that's a hard place to be a lot of times, but it starts out with having a heart for God, having a love for God and recognizing that he owns everything, right? And then it's understanding biblical principles regarding money and how we handle our finances. So those two things really are the things that we teach that will help us achieve financial peace. And so, there are the principles that we need to learn, and one of the principles is that God owns everything, right?
Yep.
In Psalms 24, it talks about the earth is the Lord and everything. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, right? And so we know he's a creator, and he owns it all. And so that's the first principle. A lot of times we don't really think through that. The Lord owns everything. And the second principle is that we are only managers.
Yeah.
We are money managers. We don't own anything. We brought nothing in the world, and we'll take nothing out of the world. And we're here a short period, right? So we're stewards. We're managers of what God's entrusted to us. And so a lot of times we don't think about that, and we think about, gosh, this is my stuff, my money, my possessions. Yeah. And a lot of times we don't really realize that God is the one that has provided all this for us. And so we have a certain attitude about it's mine, 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 me, especially when it comes to giving. Because we're only giving back a small portion of what God's already given us.
Right.
It's not like it's our money that we're giving him something that is really ours. And so that's a principle a lot of people have a hard time really getting their minds around. But if we start thinking in terms of that, then I think it's a lot easier for us to have that heart of gratitude for the Lord.
I think so. This just occurred to me. Like you always know you're supposed to give back your 10%. When you think about it, God gave you the full 100%. He only asked for 10% back. So really, it's not about our generosity; it's about His generosity.
Exactly. He's allowing us to keep 90%.
Wow.
But he gave us an allowance, a big allowance.
Big allowance.
But we talk about the tithe, and that's kind of a legalistic type of a thing,
Yes.
And people say, well, tithing is actually kind of training wheels of giving. And I say training wheels. But we give because of the heart that we have for the Lord. We give from the heart. And so we don't want to make it legalistic, but we think about, again, it goes back to the attitude and acknowledgement that God owns everything. And so then what's our response to him? How do we show love back to God? And so, again, he says that, he loves a cheerful giver. He doesn't want us to be begrudging or give out of a sense of guilt or whatever, but that we give with joy and love because of what he's given us. And so that is a principle that's really hard for a lot of people. And it was hard for me for a long time to kind of get in my mind that I kind of gave out of a position that I was obligated to give. I had to give, or I felt guilty if I didn't give. And I was a preacher's kid, right? So when you're a preacher's kid, you're expected to do certain things, and it's more of a legalistic thing. And as I've grown and I've learned more about God's principles, it's a heart thing. And so when people say, well, should I give 10% on the net or the gross? Or no. We'll say, well, you want a net blessing or a gross blessing? And so we have to kind of throw away some of that kind of thinking that it's the heart. It's all about the heart. God doesn't need our money. It's our heart. It's showing the love that we have for the Lord is what that does. And so anyway, we talk about we being managers of what God's given to us, and it's, we talk about, well, what should we be doing with that? Should we be saving for, where should our treasure be? The Bible talks about where your heart is, that's where your treasure is, right? And so we need to develop a heart for God, so our treasure should be more in heaven than on earth, right? I love what Pastor Rick Warren says. He said, would you either be walking toward your treasure or away from your treasure? Yeah. Okay? Because if your treasure's on earth, you're walking away from it, right? Every day. If it's in heaven, you're walking toward it. Yeah. You think about the way we can spend this money that God's entrusted to us. How do we want it to be viewed? And so, I thought it was always a cool way of looking at things and kind of a visual as far as what our heart should be saying to us. And so anyway, that's the manager thing. It says the next thing we want to talk about is the spending. We talk about spending plan, and a lot of people don't like to talk about spending.
I like to talk about spending. I don't like to talk about not spending.
That's right. The spending plan. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, but if I think you're probably going to get to this, but in order to get to a place where you can be generous, you have to have the money available to do that.
Yeah, God, you have to be in a position where you can bless others. And so, spending plan is just an allocation of resources, right? It's you telling your money where you want it to go.
Is this a nicer term for budget?
Yes. Okay.
I kind of like spending plan a little bit better.
That's why I use a spending plan. Well, I like to plan. I don't like to budget.
Yes.
But spending plan, and that's the term we use. And again, it's just the allocation of resources. We have limited resources coming in and unlimited opportunities to spend it, right? So, if we don't tell our money where to go, it's just going to go bye-bye. And that's what not Rick Warren, but Dave Ramsey always says, if you don't tell your money where to go, it's just going to go somewhere. And a lot of people don't know where it's going. And that's the sad thing, is that when we don't have a spending plan, a lot of times we live paycheck to paycheck, and we don't really understand what's happened to the money. We know we made it, but where to go. And the spending plan, really, it's people look at it as kind of a pain to have to go through that process of really planning your spending, but it gives such great freedom. It really does. I remember when my wife and I, when we first got married, kept a ledger. Of course, both of us are CPAs, right? And so, that was pretty easy for us. But, if we wanted to take a trip to see her cousins in Germany or go on a cruise and those kind of things, we had to plan for it.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to happen. And so, the planning part maybe, kind of a grudge for some people, but for people that go through that, there's such freedom that you gain from it. Because when you start your spending, sometimes you'll have that sense of guilt. You're going out and buy something. Say you're buying a new dress. You're wanting to make this purchase.
I'm not buying a new dress, Ron.
You're not buying a new dress.
So no problems
Good for
here.
you, Dana. I'm right there with you, man. but anyway, sometimes there's that sense of guilt because people say, I don't know if I ought to be doing this or not.
Yeah.
But when you have a spending plan, you go spend and you say, well, this is on a budget. We budgeted for it. I'm fine with it. I feel good about it. And it gives you that freedom that, that people, I think, strive for. Yeah. Instead of letting your money manage you, you manage your money.
Well, it's like they say when you have kids, they want a boundary. If they don't have the boundary that they know they can play in, they're going to test it, and they're always going to be miserable. Yeah. And as a parent, so will you. So this is basically putting boundaries on your money. This is where this can go, and that creates the freedom. That gives the kid the freedom to play, and it gives us the freedom to know where our money's at.
Exactly. I mean, so there's great freedom in doing it if you just take the time. And, the first time it's kind of tough, but once you do that and get that habit of doing it, it's not that difficult. And it does give you that freedom and allows you to plan to do the things that you really want to do. Yeah. And that's where we talk about, I think I mentioned, Corey, in one of our staff meetings, a 10-10-80.
Yes.
Maybe guideline.
Is it a driving position?
10-10-80. No. 10% first. It's allocation of our funds, right? So the first 10% goes back to the Lord.
Okay, so that's the tithe, right?
That's the training wheels, yeah. The next 10 go to savings, investments, and the 80% is our lifestyle. It's what we live on. Okay, so that's kind of a starting point. If people kind of get in their minds, if I can do the 10-10-80, I'm giving back to the Lord and I'm setting aside something for ourselves, some security. And so that kind of thing I think is very important for us to take a look at. The other thing too is that a lot of times in our spending, we've got to set priorities. And so much of the time that our priorities are so much different than the world's from a Christian perspective. From a Christian's perspective, our priority should be giving first, then saving, debt repayment, taxes, and then lifestyle. Lifestyle is kind of the last thing that we should be focusing on as far as our priorities. You plug in, there's 10% to the Lord, here's my savings. Now how do I live on the rest of this, right? And if I have debt, you got to plan for debt. But the world's the opposite. They say go out and have a great lifestyle, go out and spend, enjoy yourself, do all these things, pay your taxes and pay debts, and give's the last thing. If you have any money left over, it's all right to throw the money in the plate, but for the most part, it's just the opposite of what God's called us to do and what His principle says, that we got to give first, save second. And, you can't put a value on how much positive things giving does for not only the people you give to, but your own life. God blesses generous people, right? And so He blesses emotionally, spiritually, financially, physically, in all ways. Yeah. And it's not a give to get type thing, but it's when we give out of a heart for God that He does bless that. And generous people are blessed. And so giving really should always be the top of our priority list when we talk about spending. And so, that's something I always kind of try to stress to people, that the world's got it kind of backwards, right? Yeah.
I like the 10-10-80. Honestly, when you had said that, it changed our family's life. Like we do give, but that 10 to save too, and putting those two first before paying the bills. It changed the way we lived.
Right. Well, and people, sometimes you have to make life choices as far as your lifestyle, and especially when it comes to debt reduction. When you talk about debt reduction, God's plan is for us to pray first. Debt reduction is another big thing that hits, especially during COVID. People have to borrow money and stuff, and so now we got debt we got to repay. But God's principles talk about, first thing you do, you pray, obviously, you seek His will and help get the discernment and wisdom you need to make choices about how to go about tackling your debt, right? Which can be awesome, pretty tough sometimes. And then so after you pray, then they say list all your debts. That's obviously you need to figure out who you owe and what you owe, interest rates, and then you develop a plan. And that's where in your spending plan you have to come up with a debt reduction plan. How much of that lifestyle money am I going to have to use to pay off debt? Because that means then I got to reduce my lifestyle so I have money to pay the debt off. And so it's really important that we do that, because the proverb says that the borrower is a slave to the lender. We're in bondage when we're in debt. And God can't use us like He'd like to when we're in debt. In fact, I was counseling one lady once where she had taken bankruptcy, and she felt terrible about it. She's a Christian and felt awful, and she wanted to give it to the church. And I said, when you're in bondage, it's hard to give. We put ourselves in a position where we're in bondage. We're slaves. And so God can't really use us like He'd like to, obviously. Right. And so, debt's a very serious thing. And I remember Dave Ramsey in the courses I talked about credit card debt, and that you should cut up your credit cards, right? And, to me, that's kind of drastic. But I think, the whole idea is that you ought to use cash as much as you can and not use credit cards, because that's where you can accumulate debt without really realizing it.
Right, you don't feel it.
Yeah, you don't feel it. I mean, that's what he talks about. He said, use cash for the most part, because you can feel it. You say, bye-bye, Mr. Washington. Bye-bye, Mr. Lincoln.
If only it was Mr. Washington and Mr. Lincoln.
Mr. Hamilton. And so he talks about how you feel that. You can really feel that versus you flop down a credit card, and it's kind of like, it's not real money. It's just. So, he really does stress the idea of using cash. And so, again, there's certain ways that we can reduce our lifestyle in order to pay down debt. And I remember when I was in college, again, I was a preacher's kid, so my parents couldn't afford to send me to college or pay for my tuition, books, and all that stuff. So I had to live what I called a Spartan lifestyle. Spartan lifestyle means you really got to cut back your lifestyle in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Because I didn't want to incur debt. I ended up having $1,000 in student loan debt. And so that wasn't too bad, after 4 years of college. But, I learned to live. I remember we lived in a house, three of us, that cost $100 a month. And it was an old home, and we had no air conditioning and had a floor furnace in the middle of the living room. And, it wasn't the best, but $33 a month, that was pretty good. And then we'd go to the day-old bread place to get bread, half price. And you just did certain things that you had to do to get by. And I tell people, if they have situations where they have debt and they want to put together a plan, that there may have to be a drastic change in lifestyle. And that's not always fun to do. But usually if that it's going to be for just a short period, you can deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And if long-term, the benefits of long-term outweigh the short-term pain for long-term gain, right? Yep. And so those things are important as you do your spending plan, to really look and scrutinize where your money is going, and if we have debt, and if we're not saving like we should, we're not saving giving like we should, we're not paying off our debt like we should, then obviously lifestyle's got to change to some degree. And there's something that you have to sit down and go through. And there are ways you can cut. And in fact, I think I was telling you, Corey, people say, well, I don't have any place to cut. And I said, well, go to a grocery store and have two carts. In one cart, have the things you have to live. The other cart, the goodies. So like pop and cookies and candy, donuts. The other cart you have maybe a bag of potatoes. Dr. Pepper. And the other cart you have like a bag of potatoes and vegetables and maybe a little bread.
And coffee. That's
coffee. Is that essential or non-essential?
That's an essential.
But the cheap coffee.
Cheap coffee. Okay.
So everybody has the ability to cut back, and so. Those kinds of things are important, and I think we honor the Lord when we use his the gifts He's given us in a way that we're not spending extravagantly, and I guess you might say we're frugal. I've been accused of that, but anyway, I think it's paid off in the long run. If you ask my wife, it's not been a bad thing in the long run. Anyway, talk also about giving as an act of worship. Giving is an act of worship, and a lot of times we don't think about that. We throw a dollar bill or whatever on the plate, and we don't think about the fact that we're doing or should be doing it out of love for the Lord. We mentioned that before, that it's our tangible way of giving back to God and honoring Him and thanking Him for what He's given to us.
Yeah.
And so, again, we look at the world and how there's so much poverty in the world and how we're so blessed. And that, when we do that, I think that gives us that sense of peace again. When we talk about financial peace, that we're in the center of God's will, that we're giving back to Him, and that we're showing love for Him. And the more we do that, the more we, increase, our attitude of giving and love for Him. And so, obviously the Bible says it's more blessed to give than to receive. And
right.
Sometimes people don't get that, and I go through that, and everybody goes through that, I think, to some degree, that, hey, if I give this and I can't buy this, or if I give this and I'm going to have to, so it's a trade-off. But you look at what God can do with the blessings that you give Him in terms of furthering His kingdom and helping people and those kind of things versus us getting more stuff.
Yeah.
Because I've never talked to someone that at the end of life, they said, I wish I had more stuff and blessed fewer people.
Right.
I've never heard that, right?
Right.
It's like, I wished I had less stuff and I blessed more people.
Yeah.
And so when you look back and you think about how I've used my money and how I've managed it, there's a lot of times remorse when people look back and say, man, I wish I would have done it a little differently. And I think that's where if we really focus on some of these biblical principles throughout our life, we're always thinking about what can I do that will honor God and what has He called me to do. And so those are important. And also we want to dedicate it all to the Lord, okay? We call that dedicating it back to the Lord. We talk about the things He's given us, like time, family, money, spiritual gifts, people, the gospel even. We dedicate those things back to Him because He's given those to us to begin with. He's given us time. And so we don't think about those things. We think about money and material possessions, but there's also all these other things that we've been given from the Lord. And so I think it's important to dedicate that back to Him and say, Lord, I acknowledge these come from You, and I acknowledge that I'm responsible for being good stewards of all these things, not just money, but my family and even the gospel in terms of how we present the gospel and share the gospel. And, if we're not good stewards, then, the problem is if we aren't faithful with a little, we're not going to have much. We can't be faithful with much. The Bible talks about, if I can't trust you with worldly wealth, then why would I trust you with heavenly riches?
Wow, yeah.
You know what I mean? So you kind of think, okay, yeah, Lord, that's right. And so that's why you see a lot of people that give are some of the happiest people in the world, because they receive so much from that.
Yeah.
They really do. And the Lord has said it is blessed, more blessed. And so, again, that's a principle a lot of times we'll look over and not really contemplate, but is absolutely true. And our whole lifestyle and the way we live and that sense of financial peace it comes over us when we are able to, fulfill some of those biblical principles He's called us to.
Well, Rod, I know we can talk forever on this topic, and so many principles to be thinking about, biblical principles, and you even gave places where people can start, and the important thing is to just start, begin. But if we want more, right now we don't have a class for it, but if there's enough interest for a class, we could put one together.
Exactly.
So did we come up with an email where they can email?
I think just email info@centralcommunitychurch and say, I'm interested in a class about financial management.
So we'll have that. So email info@centralcommunity.church and let us know that you're interested. And I might join that with my husband. I think I kind of need it. So
that'd be great. I'd love to do that. I've taught a few classes here. Financial Peace with Dave Ramsey and Crown Financial Ministries have Managing Our Finances God's Way. And that's where a lot of this comes from. And so there's so much, and I wished I'd learned this earlier in life. But so I would encourage anybody that has an interest in that to let us know, because I would like to start a class, and either I can lead it or we'll find someone here that could lead it. But I think that'd be the best thing to do is if you have an interest, then may let us know what you're most interested in, what topics, or debt reduction, or the principles of giving and those kinds of things. So I'd be glad to do that and be a part of that.
Okay, well, sign up the Broadles. We will be there.
You're on record.
Who wants to join us?
She is on record. Okay.
But thanks, Rod, for being here.
Rod.
We appreciate you sharing your heart and a tough subject, I think, for some of us to hear. So I appreciate you being here.
Okay. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Rod.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening to 167. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening from.
And to keep up with everything at Central Community Church, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to watch us record this podcast live, find us on YouTube.
We think the 167 hours between church services are so important, and we hope you'll share this episode with your friends. Join us next week.